So how viable is the Chain Lightning Sorcerer in Vessel of Hatred and Season 6? Well, if we look at Season 5, it was doing really well using Andariel's Visage procs along with Chain Lightning's high lucky hit chance, and also using the Starlight aspect to basically have infinite mana. And while in Season 6, the Starlight aspect was definitely nerfed, there's actually a new configuration that you can use now to not only still have infinite mana, but actually deal way more damage than before as well. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of the major Season 6 changes and updates to the Chain Lightning build, and also how some of these new systems impact the Sorcerer in general. So with that, starting out with the major gear changes, I am using the new Heir of Perdition Mythic Helm instead of Andariel's Visage, and I have tested this on especially Tormented, or Torment 4 rather, bosses. And it does definitely seem like I do more damage even without the Andariel's proc, given the sheer amount of basically damage multiplier and crit chance and other things that you gain from Heir of Perdition. You'll also notice that I have a whopping 300 intelligence from gems. That's because there's a new tier of gems as well, which will actually greatly increase your damage and are indeed still a pretty strong contender even against the new Runewords. And speaking of the Runewords, really quick, I have something that's pretty standard across most builds, at least on the PTR, and that is running 2 Runewords, one to trigger the Barbarian's Warcry, and the other to trigger the Druid's Petrify. These two are essentially, for the most part, the best Runewords, or the best runes to use, and the trigger I have for them, as you can see, is for the Warcry I have cast a non-channeled skill, with that being mainly my Chain Lightning, which of course I can spam quite easily. And the other trigger that I have is using a skill from another class, which whenever I trigger Warcry, that counts towards triggering another class's skill. And also with the new mythic unique chest, Shroud of False Death, it actually allows you to stealth whenever you haven't attacked, and that stealth itself also triggers that rune to then trigger Petrify. So I can literally just walk around not doing anything and be able to just for free trigger Petrify, which is pretty insane. So again, these 2 Runewords, Tam Ohm and likely Zol Yom, are pretty standard across all classes, but I really hope that that will change with Vessel of Hatred, because otherwise the Runeword system will just be kind of boring and stale without a lot of variety, right? But again, but coming back to my chest piece, the Shroud of False Death is really strong, not only because of the stealth to trigger the rune, but also because the +1 to all passives, giving you a lot of damage actually across your skill tree as well as survivability. Now for the rest of my gear, a lot of it is similar to the Season 5 iteration of Chain Lightning, but there are still some other changes. Now first of all, I am still using Fist of Fate here, but you could definitely swap it out for like a legendary with say the increased Chain Lightning damage aspect, or some people have actually been using Frostburn because the procs on it are doing massive damage, the flat damage procs that is, but I think that will probably be fixed and is likely unintended. But anyhow, Fist of Fate is actually quite strong, especially against bosses because of the chance to apply crowd control on it, combined with the lucky hit chance that it provides. It actually allows you to stagger bosses like crazy, and I've had a pretty easy time with Torment 4 bosses as a result, so it might, if anything, be useful for like a gear swap for killing bosses too. But of course you can definitely replace it with like a legendary too. Moving on, Axial Condor is obviously like the choice for Chain Lightning Sorcerer, and it's actually been buffed as well in Season 6, whereas before it said that Chain Lightnings had a chance to cast twice as one of the passive or affixes on it. But because that actually, if you don't have enough mana or mana regeneration, that could actually end up hurting you, because the more Chain Lightnings you have, the higher the chance that the more mana that you drain, and whenever you drain your mana to 0, it actually nullifies all the Chain Lightnings and causes them to dissipate, right? That is one of the side effects of Axial Conduit. But with this change, from having a chance to cast Chain Lightning twice to making it hit twice, you're not getting that additional burden of additional Chain Lightnings draining your mana while still getting damage from this passive. And the same actually also applies to the weapon. The tempering, that is, it also has been changed to Chain Lightnings hitting twice. Now speaking of the weapon aspect, I am using a staff. Perhaps one-hander could be pretty strong as well, but I haven't tested that out too much. But with the staff, on my weapon, I'm using the new elemental Constellation aspect. I think this is quite interesting, and people kind of, I think, misinterpreted this as like a hybrid aspect, but if you read closely into it, the arrows that you spawn whenever you cast a spell actually get their damage increase per matching skill that you cast, right? Of the same element, it seems like. So, which means if I'm spamming Chain Lightnings, whenever I have an arrow out, each additional Chain Lightning that I cast causes the damage to ramp up for that arrow, right? In theory at least. So that's what I'm testing out right now, and it seems to be working decently well. And this is also to replace the old Season 5 choice, which was Stormswell, and because that aspect has actually been nerfed quite a bit too, whereas before it was to just gain like a bunch of vulnerable damage whenever you have a barrier up. It's actually been changed to damage while you have ice barrier up, so that's just like a lot less uptime than before. Now another good aspect to have is like, I think it's called conceded aspect, but it's the one where you gain additional damage while you have any barrier up, right? It's a bit lower damage percentage, but it's very consistent, and I've put it on my amulet as well. Previously it was like the Ice Blade's vulnerable damage aspect. That's still viable too, but you would then have to swap out, say, your familiars for Ice Blades, but I do prefer familiars here for a reason that I'll explain later. Moving on for rings. For the resource, because Starlight aspect was nerfed and the combo with Endorial's Visage doesn't really allow you to like get infinite mana anymore, but because I think recharging was actually buffed too, you can get up to 5 mana, which is a lot per Chain Lightning bounce now, assuming you have a good roll, of course. If you have this good roll, you should be able to also maintain infinite mana by swapping over to this aspect. And of course, as you can see, I also have the Starless Skies, or Ring of Starless Skies here, which probably helps quite a bit as well. But even if you don't have it yet, say on live, once Season 6 comes by, you can probably also get away with using a legendary ring with like resource generation tempering, perhaps some resource cost reduction, and if you really need, you can also run like another resource type aspect on your second ring as well, right? And by the way, the Tal Rasha loop was also nerfed, especially for singular elements. The way it works has actually changed, and I think that's good because previously basically every Sorc build was running it, but now it's been changed to more of a hybrid sorcerer, like tri-element type ring, which was sort of its intended use anyway. So that's why I'm also not using the Tal Rasha's loop anymore. Now onto skills really quick. A lot of it is highly similar to Season 5, but in Season 6 and in Vessel of Hatred, you're obviously getting some additional skill points as you can level up to level 60, and with those, here I actually have Ice Blades, but I could probably spec out of that because I'm no longer using Ice Blades, nor am I using Lightning Spear. That was because I was testing some stuff out, but instead you can put some points in the Familiar. I like Familiar here because with the enhancement, you can actually gain 10% additional damage if you have the same element out, which is just pretty good and a very consistent damage boost too. And by the way, because you get 3 charges of Familiar, you can kind of get Conjuration Mastery very easily on demand. So it's like another like 10 to 20% or more damage boost multiplier on top of like having mana regeneration and movement speed on the fly whenever you just cast your familiars, right? So I just think that's a good skill to have and a combo to use. Of course, you can get additional points to Conjuration Mastery via your amulet. Another major change that I made is with the ultimate. Well, here first I have Elemental Synergies, which is like a new passive. So I have like 3 different elements still equipped on my bar. I have like Flame Shield and Ice Barrier, right? So, or Ice Armor, right? So I obviously can benefit from that new passive. And then the rest of my points I put into Unstable Currents just to lower the cooldown on the ultimate. Oh, and another really major thing is the new key passive. Enlightenment is just a really strong key passive, and it's actually quite easy to stack up and maintain consistently. So it just gives you huge damage, even more mana regeneration and attack speed. And not only can you stack it up pretty quickly with Chain Lightnings and like decent attack speed, but whenever you're stacking it up, you can also cast Ice Armor and Flame Shield to gain additional stacks even more quickly, right? So as you can see, whenever you cast a skill of a different element, you gain like more stacks more quickly. So whenever you do like Chain Lightning, Ice Armor, another Chain Lightning, right? Switching from Ice Armor back to Chain Lightning also counts as a different element, right? So just juggling like the Ice Armor and Flame Shield allows you to stack it up really quick. And then just note that after it stacks to 100, it'll start slowly depleting as you have the buff. And that's when you want to hold off on your Ice Armor and Flame Shield, as using them won't help you stack the stacks up, right? Because they're still like depleting and you have the buff up. So that's just basically how that passive works. It's really, really strong. For the enchantments, I'm currently running Chain Lightning Enchantment as well as Firebolt Enchantment. These are like very standard choices. But I would say like maybe Ice Blades might be decent as well for like some additional cooldown reduction if you really need it. Maybe for like additional survivability with like Flame Shield perhaps. If you spec into, of course, the enhanced Ice Blades, you can get cooldown reduction. So that might be a decent choice too. Although you will lose a little bit of Chain Lightning stacks compared to using the Chain Lightning Enchantment, which is what I currently prefer. And that was a quick overview and update on the Chain Lightning Sorcerer in Season 6 and Vessel of Hatred. It does look to be one of the top contenders in the expansion for Sorcerers, and it's also a very fun build as well in my opinion. Now a lot of things could still change because this was just what was provided on the PTR. But anyhow, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'll be sure to read every single comment and reply to them. Also, let me know what build or builds you're most looking forward to trying out. Are there any features that you're very excited for Vessel of Hatred? Let me know. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing for more cutting edge content like this. And happy hunting. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.